Hello, creative, and welcome back to the Empowered Creatives podcast, finding confidence between hustle and burnout. I'm your host, Victoria Hines, creative career coach, helping creatives just like you navigate their career hurdles. I'm so excited about my guest on the show this week. She is a longtime friend of mine based in Chicago. It's Claire Malkie. She goes by the pronouns she, her, and she is a Chicago-based comedian, writer, and sometimes actor. So welcome to the show, Claire.
Thank you so much for having me, Victoria. I'm so excited to chat with you today.
Absolutely. So I'm going to kick it off with the really big, intense question. Are you ready?
Yes.
What do artists and creatives need to know is possible today?
Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. I think they need to know that there are lots of avenues to create your art, no matter what it is. And you can find that on the internet. You can find that in person. And you might have to be a little scrappy, but I always think there's a way to do it.
I love that. So almost really just kind of reaching into the creative mindset and finding a way to make something come to life.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very different than the collegiate, which I know you can talk a lot about this, but I feel like in college, we're sort of set up with these, this roadmap or this playground. And it's here, go into this playground. Here's all the tools you have. Here's all the resources and make it. And then you sort of graduate into the real world and it's okay, the playground becomes so much bigger, but you don't have the resources at your disposal. And you're just sort of okay, what do I do next? Mm-hmm. So I would love to hear your story of what was it like transitioning from going to college, and you were a BFA major, correct, in acting?
Yes. I have a BFA in acting like everyone else, so I went to a small Christian high school, and it was only me and two other people who studied theater. And that was it, which was even a surprise. So I was when I would come home for holidays, I was like, oh, I'm getting a BFA in acting. And that was so unique. And then I graduated. My BFA class was 16 people, and I went to college at Hofstra University, which is on Long Island, which is right outside of New York City. So our program was basically tailored to New York City. But here's the problem with New York is that it's only really good for musical theater. There is a stand-up scene there. There is a really good stand-up scene, but that's not what I was focusing on back in undergrad. But so they were training us for New York City, but we were all Shakespearean classical actors. So there was this big disconnect because every call was, South Pacific, Elf the Musical, non-union tours. And some people were really good singers and dancers, but that wasn't what we had trained in. And so a quick story. My best friend, Laura, and we went to a call for South Pacific, and we were Laura, for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm a blonde white woman. So South Pacific seemed like a good fit for me. And my friend Laura is a similar type. So we went to this audition. It was non-union. We woke up super early, and then we got to the call, and they were only looking for women of color who were below 5'3" in height or above 5'7" in height. So we had we had traveled into New York City all to be typed out and not even seen at this audition. And that was my senior year. I hadn't graduated yet. And from that moment on, I was like, New York City is not the place for me.
Right.
So then I moved to Chicago. Yeah. Because a friend of mine was like, oh, there's a lot of new play development. So then I came out here to Chicago.
What was it like stepping into Chicago and that scene for the first time?
Oh my goodness. Well, so I'm from the East Coast originally too. And I grew up right outside of Washington, D.C. And then I went to college right outside of New York City. So honestly, the rest of the country was just not on my radar because so many people had come to those places. And I remember when I asked my parents if they would allow me, quote unquote, to move to Chicago. And they were like, yeah, of course. You can go anywhere you want. And I was like, what? It was scary though, because all of my friends from college all still lived in New York City. I did move here with two friends, but they knew a lot of people here, which was helpful and not, because sometimes I would be included and sometimes it would be just, I had to find my own way with things.
Hmm.
Um, but I honestly think it was one of the best decisions I ever made, because I think it really forced me to grow. Um, because even though I love my friends from college, but I feel like if I had stayed with them, I might have always been who I was in college. And I
Yeah.
really had to figure out what I wanted. And it was kind of crazy when I moved here because no one knew anything about me. And
Hmm.
even though I sort of had that going into freshman year of college, it was kind of nice to have a blank slate, I guess.
Absolutely. I mean, there's that whole saying, which I think is absolutely true. Like, you are the sum of the five people you hang out with the most. And I don't know if you've ever read the book, Defining Decade, but I vividly, like, I read it right after college or right when I was a senior in college. And I vividly remember the story of sometimes when you stay, it was like a psychologist telling this story of one of her clients. And she was like, because they had stayed just so connected to their college friends, they never grew from that point in their life. They were kind of like always just stuck in this college mindset. So I agree with you. I mean, I also kind of hopped over to Chicago. I knew people, but didn't necessarily know a ton of people, and they weren't necessarily like my super close best friends. And it's a scary thing to do, but it really kind of teaches you how to become your own person and grow in that space.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it was hard and I was jealous and I really missed my friends, but like I met people like you who I would have never met if I didn't come to Chicago. Or, I also, part of also why I left was there were just some people that I knew weren't my people in New York, and I knew they
Mhm.
would be in circles that I didn't want to hold on to those old connotations of myself. But yeah, it really forced me to think about who I wanted to be, and the lessons I learned in college and how I wanted to move forward in Chicago with those.
Absolutely. So, I've been dying to ask you this question. What
Yes.
inspired you to start making your own work?
Oh my goodness, that is a great question. So, funny enough, when I was in college, I studied Shakespearean acting,
Mhm.
which was amazing. I loved it. But upon graduation, they told us the best way to get work is to make it yourself, which was a little contradicting to what they had been teaching us all these 4 years. Was,
Right.
Shakespeare, Greek, Chekhov, all these things. Um, so I always had that in the back of my brain, but I was like, oh, that's not for me. I'm an actor. I'm a classic actor. I don't need to create anything. It'll all be
Mhm.
handed to me. um, but I started working part time at the Second City on the night staff. I was like a bar back. I would seat people. I worked, a slew of jobs on the like service side of that job. And Second City is based in sketch comedy, which is all writing and improv and creating. And one of the perks of working there is we got to take classes for free. And I was like, I'm stupid if I don't take these classes.
Oh, yeah.
And just meeting all these people who were writing their own shows. And I will say in Chicago, this might have changed a little bit since the panini, but it's fairly easy to put up a sketch show, a comedy show. There's lots of like black box venues. And I was like, wow, all these people are just getting their group of friends together, writing a show, and it has like a 4 week run on, Thursday nights. I was like, that's so cool. Like I could totally do that. Like if other people my age are doing it, like I guess I could do it as well.
What are some examples of the types of work that you've produced or you've decided to make on your own?
Oh my gosh. So many things. So I had an improv team for a while called Agent Carol. It was really fun. We had a like a James Bond-esque style of improv. So it was narrative. So we all played different characters that had a little costume piece. So at the top of every show, we would all pick which costume piece we were going to be, and we would do that character. So we did that. We did a couple of runs of that. And we actually had a sketch show that we were doing that was separate that we were going to put up April of 2020, but rest in peace that.
Oh, yeah. Yep, yep, yep.
So I have done that. I also have worked on a podcast for the last 2 years. That has just come to a close. I have done that. And then I also have a YouTube channel that I've been working on. And I do stand up now, which even though I'm not producing a full length show per se, I am writing my own act and am, working with whoever the producers of the shows I'm allowed to go on, which has been really fun too.
That's really cool. So that's a lot of different projects.
Yeah.
How did the pandemic sort of originally impact or change these projects for you?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, that's the pandemic really did in a sense give me the time I was really needing because
Mm,
before I worked in the fitness industry and then I worked part-time at an office. So I was working at two gyms and an office. So I was all over the place. And I actually was getting cast in improv shows pretty regularly, which was exciting, but I was exhausted. I was so tired and I just didn't know any different because that's what it had been like in
mhm.
college. That's just what life was. And so when everything else stopped and I could still work on this project virtually, my podcast partner, Michael, he lived fairly close to me. So, and we were in a bubble. Like it was basically just like I was staying with my partner at his house. So I would go from my partner's house to Michael's house and like that was it. But it just gave me the time to really put all of my energy into the podcast. And I was getting my unemployment checks. So it kind of felt like I was getting paid in a sense.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, it just really gave me the time I needed to. I had kind of, in a sense, lost everything I had been working on. And the podcast I had
Mm.
started in January of 2020. So I was like, well, now I have this time to work on it. So let's do it. Let's do it up.
Focus on the podcast. That's amazing. So the podcast is called Sit Still, Look Opinionated for anybody who's listening, which I will add a little link in the show notes below. I would love to ask you though. So I know you prefaced at the beginning of this podcast that you've decided to sort of put that podcast into the box, that project, and sort of put it on the shelf again. What led to that decision for you? And how did you know it was kind of time to move on to the next thing?
Yeah, it's doing a podcast is a big undertaking, as I'm sure you know.
Yep.
And even though they are extremely rewarding, I have just felt my energy and my curiosity moving in other directions.
Mm.
Um, so I am pursuing stand up at the moment, and writing stand up, going to open mics, networking takes a lot of energy, and that's about the same amount of energy I would have been given to the podcast.
Mhm.
And we've been on hiatus from the podcast since December. And I was just thinking about the process that we make the podcast with. The Sit Still Look Opinionated was in seasons. So we would make 12 episodes at a time, which is great, but it just is a lot of work. And they're highly produced because we write sketches. We had weekly, like weekend update SNL style jokes that we would write. And I also did interviews with people. And I just knew all that work. I had felt like I had done it and I knew what I was going to be getting into. And it just wasn't exciting me anymore. It wasn't like lighting that
Hmm.
spark of curiosity. And I just knew that I wasn't going to be giving it the credit and the energy it deserves as a project. And my podcast partner, Michael, he's been booking a lot of production jobs. And I know
Mhm.
his focus is really on that as well. And so I was like, this has been really great, but I think we both have some different things we're interested in. And he was like, yeah, I think you're right. But we're still gonna work on other creative projects together. We're gonna still meet to discuss what we're working on. But I just knew that it was a really big undertaking and I just was interested in doing other things than spending time on it.
Yeah. Everything you just said about that project reminds me of just kind of, and it's something I've felt as an entrepreneur, is there is a time and season for everything. And that is life as well. And I found that I tend to be more confident and more self assured and feel more stable when I recognize that sometimes there is a season where my focus is over here, maybe on my life or my health. And sometimes my focus is over here on a different project. And it's okay for those seasons to be in flux. It kind of reminds me of like theater productions where, you have the like 2, 3 weeks of rehearsals and the show goes up and you have the 5 week run. And then it comes to a close. And it's time to like tear down the set and the stage goes black and it's on to the next thing, which is a very, very bittersweet process.
Yeah, I completely agree. And that's what it felt like because we would do productions. And even though they were so rewarding, I just have done this process and I'm interested in doing other projects. And it is bittersweet. And I am a little, like, oh, like, this project has come to a close, but it wasn't like it was snatched away from me. It was a decision that I
Mhm.
really came to terms with and it felt like the right decision. And I also wasn't missing working on it, which that was a big sign to me.
Yeah,
Mhm.
absolutely. I mean, if you take a step away from something and it doesn't feel like you're missing it, then it's probably time to step away, which I know is how I kind of felt with acting.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean I won't ever go back, but for right now, I was just kind of like that environment wasn't helping me grow anymore. So it was time to take a step back and just explore something new for a while.
Yeah. I've also been feeling the desire and urge to create community. And as
Mm,
much as I loved working on that podcast, it was very solitary.
yeah.
And stand up and writing can be solitary as well. But at least when I go to an open mic, there are other people there that I am talking with. And at this moment, I really want to know people, talk to people, be around people. And even though interviews and I knew I would be talking to a group of people with the podcast, I was like, I want to meet more people. I want to go out and enjoy the summer. Yeah.
Which makes total sense because we were basically locked inside our homes for a year and a half. And
hmm
yeah, it makes sense that all of us are kind of now just trying to figure out, okay, I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm trying to figure out like, what is that balance of giving myself the time and the space for self care and not overscheduling myself, but also finding that community and going out and meeting people again, which is intimidating.
Oh yeah, I completely agree. It's honestly something I've been discussing with my therapist about how to, engage with people and how to, be in society again. It's a big undertaking.
Finding that right balance in your career is incredibly difficult as a creative. If you are lacking time, energy, or money to do the thing that you love, it might be time to figure out what needs to change. If you have no idea where to start, I encourage you to grab my free Creative Career Audit. This worksheet will walk you through a process to help you identify what's bringing you joy in your work and what really needs to go. You can head to my website at www.victoriahines.com or grab the direct link in the show notes below. Alrighty, back to the show. So, I want to ask you, was there ever a moment in your career where you felt unbalanced?
Yeah, yeah. I had touched upon when I worked 3 jobs, but that was just
Hmm.
really tough because I had ingrained in me that if I got a full time job, if I worked in an office, I was less of an artist. I was less than. And I know working in an office is not for everyone. I totally understand that. Some people do not prefer it. But for me, the constant juggling of my schedule, the not knowing if I could take a day off, it was really hard. And I felt super unbalanced because I felt like I had to, do the most at all of my jobs because I worked at a gym that I had attached a lot of my personality to working at that gym. And so I felt like I had to give the most to be an employee there. And then I had to do the most in my improv classes because in my theater training, you leave everything at the door, you come to class, you come to your rehearsal, and you're 100% there, which is something I appreciate about myself, but it can get toxic if I push it too far. And yeah, that was, honestly like 2018, 2019 into, 2020 right before. I felt really unbalanced in those moments.
Absolutely. Was there anything that you did to sort of try to find that equilibrium again?
Once I was, furloughed from all my jobs, once I had really everything that I had attached myself to, I realized they could be gone at any moment. And I really had to look within myself and figure out what I could do. And
Mm,
it made me think about my values a lot more, which I had never thought about before because I was always giving to other people or other companies or other things because they were more important than myself. And I
mhm,
realized I was like, "Oh, what makes me happy?" And I'm still working through that, but learning how to set boundaries, learning how to end projects, learning how to distance myself from people that aren't accepting me for who I am. And it's been a lot of inner work. I highly recommend therapy to everyone, even if you don't think you need it. Because I definitely,
100%.
I definitely thought I didn't need therapy, but yeah, just really thinking about what is important to me and listening to that sense in my body of, do I want to do this or do I don't? And it's not always, I don't want to go to work every day, but I kind of have to, quote unquote. But I think really listening to my inner voice, I had never done that before.
Mm. What what does listening to your body or listening to that inner voice feel like to you? Like if you were to put words, descriptive words to that feeling?
Ooh, I love that. Just feeling genuinely comfortable and not feeling my heart racing, my jaw clenching, my shoulders scrunching up. I feel like such an actor right now, but it's really true. Like I know when I feel comfortable working on something, I can be myself. I can speak clearly. I'm not, is that okay with you? Is everything good? What do you
Mhm.
need? What are your thoughts? Um, which I find myself when I'm uncomfortable, I revert to the other person a lot more or the other thing, the other entity, whatever it may be.
Oh, I can so deeply relate to that. And it's funny too. All of us, I think, I know I usually feel it in my throat, in my chest when I'm like
Mhm.
off balance or doing something that I shouldn't be doing. Like there's just like that tight constriction. And I don't even realize I'm holding the tension there until I make a decision in the opposite direction. And it's like, oh, that feels right. That just feels like there's a release, there's comfort there.
Mhm.
But it's strange how much, even though we've had so much acting training, we still feel cut off from that sense of truth.
Yeah. And I think because I could find it in I wrote something down. I was doing a mind map about theater school and I said I didn't know who I was, so I couldn't bring my full self to the character, but I didn't know I had even a full self. So I
Hmm.
could create a whole world for a character, but I didn't have a full world in myself.
Ugh, that's so sad and poetic and beautiful. And what what has been the way that you've kind of helped yourself come back to yourself and find that again?
Honestly, having hobbies because and
Yep.
doing things as an artist, and I also identify as an entrepreneur. I'm very curious, and I want to master everything, and I want to be good at everything. That's just who. It's not a competition thing. It's just who I am. Um, but I've started playing with makeup just for fun, not because it's for anyone else, but it's another form of art form that I enjoy the process of doing because that's what art is, right? The process. And there's so many
Mhm.
other things like with the piano. I have my piano right next to me where it's like, okay, I have to get the scales right because I did that as a child. But it's like, oh, what if I enjoyed the feeling of doing it? So I'm trying to diffuse that I need to be the best, whereas let me enjoy the process of. But yeah, having hobbies that aren't related to some sort of sellable skill, which is really hard for me. It's so difficult for me not to want to sell all of my skills.
Yep, I struggle with it too. I mean, I have as many hobbies as well, like baking and doing art and all of these other things, and I constantly find myself, okay, how can I turn this into something that's profitable or put it out into the world or make it leverage it in my business? And I'm like, no, like the second I think of doing that, I don't know how it feels in your body, but like I just feel myself like tightening up and being like, no, 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 no. Like you have to protect this.
I completely agree. I completely agree.
Yeah.
I do at home yoga and it's like, oh, I could become a yoga teacher on the side. And it's like, no, no, just enjoy this.
Yeah, not everything has to be monetized.
And in that same vein, it allows me to want to monetize the things that I really want to monetize. So
Mhm.
I've done a lot of thinking and it's like, I'm going to focus on my money in my YouTube channel and doing stand up. Stand up might not make me any money, but it's like, those are the professional avenues I'm going down because if I try to do everything, I will do nothing. And I know that about myself.
I love that. So limiting it to kind of like looking at like the scope of all these projects and passions and hobbies that you have, but then choosing two, it sounds like that you're going to focus on monetizing on top of that. I'm assuming also your day job as well.
Oh yeah, my day job is what funds. My day job is my venture capitalist, and then they're investing in me. um, but that doesn't mean I'll never do a play again, or if my friend needs help producing something, like I would love to help with that. Because I allowed myself, I check the audition calls every now and then, and if there's something that I really want to do and I have the time, I'll
Mhm.
audition for it. But honestly, nothing has really been like, oh, I really want to do that and I can do the dates. And that's been really freeing.
Absolutely. I think it's the strongest place to be. Yeah, it just gives you this level of confidence of you're able to say no.
Mm-hmm.
Last, I want to ask you one more question before I leave it to you to tell us how our audience can get a hold of you. But what
Yeah,
advice would you give to an artist who is looking to feel more confident in their career today?
that is such a wonderful question. And I think you really have to separate you from your work.
Hmm.
And that is the most difficult thing to do because I am looking for validation always. I'm always looking for validation and acceptance, but that will not come until I accept myself and validate myself. So no matter what your work is, it has nothing to do with you as who you are as a human because you have inherent worth. You are allowed to be in whatever space you're in. And I heard on Mike Birbiglia's podcast. He was interviewing another comedian, I forget who, but they were talking about stand up and how if you have an amazing set, you're allowed to be happy about it until 11 a.m. the next day, and then you have to move on. Same thing if you have a horrible set, you're allowed to be sad about it until 11 a.m. the next day, and then you have to move on because you can't hold on to anything. So yeah, just really be true to yourself, and the more you are true to yourself, the more your work will shine.
Hmm. The ending of Mulan is now playing in my head. That little
Oh my
song of "Be
gosh,
True to Yourself." Da, da, da,
yes.
da, 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 da. All right, Claire, how can we stay in touch with you?
Oh my gosh, Victoria, this has been so much fun. I am on every form of social media is the Claire Malkie. So TheClaire Malkie, all lowercase, all strung together. Yeah, I'm mostly active on YouTube, Twitter, and Instagram. I do have a TikTok, but that's more of a hobby.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Claire, for being on the show today and for sharing your story and being vulnerable with us and sharing your wisdom.
Oh, thank you so much, Victoria. This has been so much fun. It's always a pleasure to chat with you.
All right, creative, here's your one thing this week. I want you to go ahead and write down all of your creative passions, projects, and interests. Once you've created that list, I want you to go back through it and ask yourself, which ones do you want to monetize? And which ones need to stay a hobby for right now? If possible, go ahead and limit those monetizing projects to 3 max. You want to make sure you're not burning yourself out by trying to make everything work or a job or monetized. All right. Thanks so much for tuning in, Creative, to the show this week. If you would like to support the podcast, there are 3 free ways that you can do so. Go ahead and subscribe to the show, give it a rating on Apple Podcasts, and leave a review if you're feeling super generous. Until the next time, stay creative.